What do you see as the majority of? I feel like the majority of Zoomers, who are kind of the future,
Hmm.
are way more left leaning and leaning towards that side than millennials. Even, do you think that's
Sure,
true?
they are, but again, imagine if we took a poll, and I'm sure you can actually find this during the draft. How were the boomers? I'm sure they were all significantly more far left than their parents, significantly far more left than they are now
Mm-hmm.
because they're all young. I mean, that's the stereotype, isn't it? The kids are all leftist hippies and then they
Right,
get
and
jobs.
we've certainly gone further towards the left since then, though, as a result of that. But it's like I'm saying, like, where are the
Well,
brakes on
wait a
this
minute.
train?
I
Where are we
I
going?
I disagree completely. I don't think the country as a whole hasn't gone further to the left since the 70s. With the exception of the woke stuff, hasn't. Economically, it's gone to the right. That's why we're in this
I
kind
think
of weird
culturally,
place.
well,
I mean, maybe culturally, yeah, culturally we've gone to the left, but
even
economically we've gone to the right.
economically, how do you figure that? Economically, we have expanded welfare, we've expanded um, government, the size of government, our budgets, deficit spending.
Because we went from, and this is like the whole Mark Blythe breakdown of the economy, from the 50s to the 70s or to the late 80s. We had the whole, you could, the reason that our parents could go to college, or not even, or just skip college and just get like a job in a factory somewhere and become a middle class earner, was because labor had so much power from the 50s to the 80s. And then when you had Reagan come in and you had the neoliberal economic reset, and it shift all the economic power, as you were talking about, to the banks and to the capital class.
Mhm.
And that's why if you look at the charts, that's why we have the massive wealth inequality between the 99.1%, which was significantly less during the 50s through the 80s.
Mhm.
So that's what I mean. I understand what you're saying, that there could be more government programs, but to me, all those more government programs is to address, they're all like band-aids to address the fact that our economy is far more neoliberal than it ever was, or I mean it was in the 50s and 70s.
Hmm. Yeah. I don't even know if I'm educated enough on economics to really give a solid. I mean, I think you're right. Maybe there's something that joins both of what we're saying, but I'm not smart enough to figure it out.
Well, no, I think you're right. It's just that we're talking about different things. You're talking about the government's reaction to something, and I'm talking about what the private sector is doing. And to
Okay.
me, when it comes to the economy in America, the government is always playing catch up. They're always trying. They're putting
Yeah,
band-aids on
yeah.
things. They're reacting. They're not the ones necessarily driving things beyond like maybe interest rates or whatever.
Well, yeah, I would say interest rates are pretty significant.
Sure, sure.
Um, but yeah, I mean, in a greater sense, I think I do agree with you, anyways, and just that again, like this is my view of politics is that it's all just downstream from economy at this point, anyways. So
Right.
the way things are going economically, whether doesn't matter what people want politically, it's all going in a more global direction, in a more centralized direction. Amazon, for example, is putting countless things out of businesses. So it's like services like that
Mm-hmm.
are just naturally making. I mean, almost like I would almost draw a one to one of like where all the money is going and all the resources are going being centralized, and then people losing individual rights is like a consequence of that almost directly. It's like if all the resources are controlled by one source, then how are you going to have any leverage as a as a
Yeah. No,
autonomous
I
citizen?
definitely I agree with that completely, and that is a huge problem that's going on right now. Is that we just have these massive
How do you fight
companies
that? You can't.
sucking
I
up
mean,
more. I don't
I don't
know.
know. Yeah.
Well, this is the problem. Um, there's no political will to fight that currently right now because
Well, the
we're in
left
this.
is supposed to be, but they're focused on nonsense like gender and race, but they
Right.
historically have been the ones to do that. But
That's what's so exactly. And I'm saying that's why we live in such this weird situation, because it's like, as you said, yes, it used to be the left that was fighting these massive corporations, these massive financial institutions, but now they're focused on woke shit. And I think part of that is because the Occupy Wall Street movement failed so spectacularly that it sort of demotivated people caring about financial issues on the left. I think part of it is downstream from politicians who are promoting woke race shit because they think it's going to help them get elected. So that's what they're hyper fixated on. And part of it's that all these large companies are all fucking virtue signaling wokeness, and they're all virtue signaling anti-Republican, anti-Trump values, which would make it awkward then for the Democrats to go around and say, well, we're going to regulate the shit out of you. And then it's bizarre because then
there's certainly
co-opting
of, or I mean, again, cynical view here. I view these massive corporations, tech companies and the like, and government and media pretty much as acting in unison these days. And that, I think, is like the textbook definition of fascism, the marriage of state and industry.
Well, remember, our government isn't a unified entity.
Well, I know on paper it's not, but it's certainly...
Well, even in practice. I mean, there's a reason we have so little laws passing in the federal government.
Well, yeah, but they don't need, like, okay, let me put it to you this way. If Facebook is acting in the interests of the government, we don't need any laws passed. If Facebook is effectively the new town square, then they can control speech all they want, functioning as a private entity. That's the way they've bypassed.
I understand it, but what I'm saying is, when you say Facebook is acting within the interest of the government, there's no unified interest of the government, because the Democrats and Republicans have vastly different interests.
Okay, but when Speaker of the House, or not, sorry, the press secretary, whatever her name is like, when you're banned on one platform for misinformation, we need to hold Facebook to a higher standard for misinformation. And Zuckerberg is like, awful. Yes, we need to do better.
Yeah, I agree. That's
acting it. Right. That's one. I mean, I agree that not all sides of the government are being heard, obviously, because the government is us. The government is not like this shadowy figure. It's us. But I guess what I'm saying is corporatism has taken over our government.
Oh, no, I agree with you. And I'm only pushing back on conceptualizing like the government as this sort of monolithic entity that has a goal, because I don't think that's not the way it works. There's all these different power structures that are kind of vying for power, and they all have very different interests.
Correct. But the interests of tech and most media companies and like the White House are pretty much line in step these days.
Right. But when Trump was president, they were completely at odds with that.
And that's why he was a useful idiot, because it's like, see, we're not a part of the establishment. We're the resistance. And then all the blue-haired people are like, oh my God, fascism. And now when there's actual fascism, what are they doing? They're fucking, whatever.
Well, I wouldn't classify this. I didn't like what she said about that the government is flagging things for Facebook to take down. That's really fucked up. I wouldn't go so far as to say that that's fascism. But the issue, the weirdness of the situation we're in, is because, as you said, normally it'd be the Democrats fighting against this stuff, but they're not, because of the reasons I listed out. But then this would fall on the shoulders of the Republicans to be the ones to take up the mantle. But they're not fighting it either, because they've spent the last 40 years being the party of pro-business. And I guess they're just not.
There is no party that is fighting it. And I think that's also what I'm saying. Design. I think
I don't think it just sort of happened this way. I mean, it wasn't by design.
Sorry. That's okay. Yeah, that's a better way to say it. You're right. I don't think there's like, I'm not alleging that there was like a top-down plan, to arrange everything in this way. Again, like I view it through these are just kind of surface level amalgamations of economic forces. You know what I mean? Like it all starts from follow the money. It all starts from that. And at some point in history, the economy was meant to serve the interests of people. But I think at some point, the economy became this machine that's like separate from, this kind of ties into like technocracy and AI for me, is like, at some point, the interests of the economy became so divorced from the interests of actual people. Like GDP is a good example of this, where it's not really a measure of anything like regarding people's actual happiness or even financial success in a country these days,
right?
Because it's so outsourced, it's so globalized, it's all these different factors. It's more of a thing of like resources or whatever. But what I was getting at is, at some point the economy became divorced from actually benefiting the interests of humanity